Does your watch have a secret? Many of mine do. Here are several of my watches that each have a secret. Hello again, watch friends. Welcome back. It's been said that every watch has a story. That's true. But I also think many watches have a secret. Some secrets are obvious, while others are more subtle or hidden. Here are a few more watches with secrets that I think are interesting and that might even surprise you. I can't think of a watch brand that has as many diverse and different models as those from Seiko. Over the last 50 years, Seiko has made everything from chronographs — they were arguably the first to introduce an automatic chronograph — to iconic divers, to dress watches at every conceivable price point. This particular vintage Seiko alarm watch has an interesting secret. Let me tell you about it. It's the Seiko BellMatic from 1968. I believe it was Seiko's first alarm watch, and being mechanical and from the 60s, had a mechanically produced alarm. No piezoelectric solid-state action going on here. When digital watches started arriving in the late 70s, alarm watches became commonplace. And today, you can buy a $10 digital watch that has at least one alarm. Spend a few bucks more, and you can get multiple alarm functionality. Seiko launched the BellMatic in 1966, and it was the world's first automatic alarm watch with a central rotor. When this particular mechanical alarm watch was made, the complication was an example of a watchmaker's technical prowess. It seems quite remarkable in retrospect that from the 1950s to the 1970s, an alarm complication was available on many mainstream affordable watches. Seiko manufactured this watch in various models and styles for 12 years, from 1966 to 1978. You don't see many mechanical alarm watches anymore, and when you do, they're expensive. Like the Jaeger LeCoultre Memovox in the high thousands, or the Vulcain Cricket in the low to mid thousands, that introduced the complication and is still selling them today, just to name two. Now we come to the secret, because there is something quite special about this particular watch. It's the origin story of this exact watch as indicated on the bracelet clasp. The clasp reads H.R. Schoenberg, Saigon 68. Obviously, the watch was owned and worn by someone with that name in Vietnam during the war. But who knows how the watch ended up in my hands? Did the original owner lose it? Was it stolen? Was the watch handed down to a family member and they sold it? There are many unanswered questions, and I was resolved to never knowing the answers to these questions. However, as incredible as it may seem, I was able to track down and speak to Mr. Schoenberg. As he recounted to me, he was in the Air Force and stationed in Vietnam at that time. He belonged to a special unit that moved around a lot, without much notice and often quickly. Mr. Schoenberg said he either lost the watch in one of those moves or someone in his unit stole it. Nevertheless, he never saw it again and rarely, if ever, thought about it. He seemed mildly amused and slightly disinterested when I called him and told him I had his watch. He didn't want it back and said he wears an inexpensive digital watch now. So there it is, a watch with an interesting beginning, but who knows how many owners have owned it and how many wrists it has graced. Here's a secret that many watch collectors learn soon enough, either by osmosis, by visiting various Facebook groups and viewing YouTube videos, or from personal experience in the early days of their watch collecting journey. It's the Franken Watch, a watch that purports to be a certain brand or model, but is actually made up of various pieces from various watches of various brands. Just like the Frankenstein monster, whose amalgamation of parts was his defining characteristic, various is the key word here. If you frequent eBay, you'll see dozens and dozens of watches described as vintage Oris watches and selling for a paltry $25 or so, sometimes even less. More often than not, these sellers were located in India, and the watches they are selling are simply fakes, not Oris, not original, and usually not worth even the $25. The dial might say Oris, but it's not an Oris watch, and usually the dial is refinished, not original. Oris is still a modern brand with some pretty good watches, so this is no slur on the brand at all. The most authentic thing about this watch is the movement. Frequently an FHF ST96, a cheap, ubiquitous 50-year-old design from a movement maker long gone, actually swallowed up by the Swatch Group. Fabrique de Horlogerie de Fontaine-Mellon, or FHF for short, was founded in 1793 and absorbed by ETA in 1985. The FHF movements were powering watches from dozens of brands in the mid-20th century. The FHF ST96 is a pretty simple movement that, since it's so cheap and ubiquitous, could be used for practicing your watchmaker skills, disassembling and reassembling the movement, removing and reattaching the hands, etc. There are other Franken watches, of course, not just those being marketed as an Oris. These fakes can have almost any brand name and can range on the bogus continuum from a replica that mimics, sometimes in expert detail, the look and feel of a particular watch to a somewhat less than truly original specimen, such as, say, a vintage Seiko with non-standard or incorrect parts in the movement. I've seen almost perfect copies of a Rolex Submariner for sale, but if you were to open the case, you probably see a cheap Asian movement inside. On the outside, looks like a Rolex. On the inside, looks like crap. Best to stay away from these type of watches and not patronize the sellers of fakes. This unassuming but attractive watch really has two secrets. But before I describe the secrets, I should briefly tell you about the watch. This is a world timer with 29 cities available. To change to the local time, all you do is pull out the crown and rotate the hour hand to point to the desired city on the perimeter of the dial. Then push the crown back in, and the watch automatically adjusts the time to that city. It's really that simple, and actually fun to watch. The Casio Oceanus sells for about $600, but looks much more expensive than it is. Also, it's a quartz watch, a giveaway if you notice the seconds hand jumping from second to second. The case, bezel, and bracelet are all made of titanium, so it's extremely light on the wrist. In fact, wearing this watch feels like you're not wearing a timepiece at all. Now the secrets. First, the Oceanus is a radio watch, meaning that it receives a timing signal from any of 6 atomic clocks around the world. This occurs automatically overnight, so the time is always correct. The signal sets the watch to the correct time and date, and the watch even indicates if the time setting was successful. Of course, setting the date and time can also be done manually if needed. In the U.S., the atomic signal comes from the Naval Observatory in Denver, and I've had no issues with the reception of the signal where I live in northern New Jersey. The second secret is that this Casio is a solar model, which means that the battery is charged by either natural or artificial light. The power lasts up to 7 months on a full charge. If the watch is stored in the dark, say in a drawer or your watch box, the watch will save power automatically, and the charge will last up to 29 months. Amazing. At about 40 millimeters in diameter and just 10 millimeters thick, this watch is rightly sized for a dress watch, yet looks a little bit sporty, I think. And with the automatic time and date updates and automatic internal battery charging, this is a watch whose secrets add to the functionality and usefulness of the watch. You wouldn't know it from looking at this vintage Seiko watch, but this reference 6146-8000 was one of the first high-beat Grand Seiko watches. And that's the secret. Spoiler alert. Let me explain. The official name of this highly desirable vintage Grand Seiko watch is Automatic Weekdater, because both the day and date are displayed on the dial. There's another version of this watch with the 6145 movement, which has a date only. It's generally recognized, at least in Seiko and Grand Seiko circles, that this movement, the 6146/6145, is one of the best high beat movements ever made by Seiko. Beating at 36,000 beats per hour, also called vibrations per hour, it was designed to be highly accurate and reliable. These watches and their variants are generally called 61GS models, since the movement name starts with 61, and they are Grand Seiko references. A high beat movement, whether from Seiko, Zenith, or any other brand, beats at a very high frequency, generally movements oscillating faster than 28,800 beats per hour. Most watches today beat at either 21,600 or 28,800 beats per hour, which translates to 3 or 4 hertz, respectively. The calculation, for those interested, is the beats per hour divided by 2, because each of the 2 swings of the balance wheel in opposite directions counts as an oscillation, and then divided by 360, 60 seconds in a minute, and 60 minutes in an hour, of course, to give the cycles per second, commonly known as hertz. So doing the math, this 36,000 beat per hour movement is rated at 10 hertz, as would any 36,000 beat per hour movement. Although there's some debate as to whether a high beat movement is more accurate than a lower frequency one, the thinking goes something like this. Natural movements of human hands and wrists generally occur below 3 hertz, so a movement oscillating at that frequency, or lower, could be subject to mechanical disturbances as we move naturally. Therefore, the higher the beat rate, the less susceptible the movement is to natural mechanical disturbances. At least that's the theory. So now you know the secret of my Grand Seiko 61GS. What is no secret is the lasting beauty of this watch and its timeless design. To quote Grand Seiko, the Grand Seiko style is a design language of simplicity, purity, and practicality. It reflects exactly the essential characteristics of Grand Seiko: precision, beauty, legibility, and ease of use. Form and function in perfect harmony. I couldn't agree more. My 61GS was born in March 1968, and interestingly, Seiko made only 36,000 of these models. I wonder where they got that number from. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your watch friends, and subscribe if you already haven't, so as to be alerted of new content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.